This week, Chinese President Xi Jinping talked on the phone with U.S. President. This is the very first direct communication between the heads of state this year. What was on the agenda and where are China-U.S. economic and trade relations headed? I'm asking those questions to James Zimmerman, the chairman of American Chamber of Commerce in China. Jim, good to see you. Thank you so much for your hospitality.
Good to see you too.
We have seen the latest news. Two presidents talked on the phone with one another.
My takeaway is that it was a good conversation. I mean, I think it's important for the two leaders to have an ongoing dialogue. The more they talk, the more they can get issues and complications in the relationship out. And that's something that's very, very important because it also, from the business perspective, it raises the confidence of the business community if the two leaders are talking. It brings clarity and predictability to the relationship. So it's the more they talk, the better it is for business.
According to the Chinese readout, the U.S. President Donald Trump in the phone call talked about U.S. and China have had good interactions in areas of trade and economics.
It will take some time to get the specifics and whatever agreement needs to be worked out. They have a good dialogue, and they want to work through some of the complexities in the trade and economic and security relationships. So the plans for a summit in April are good. But I don't think the business community is expecting any grand bargain to come out of that meeting. There may be some deliverables, but overall, we can expect conversations, more dialogue throughout the year to work through some of the complexities and issues with the, in the relationship.
What the business communities from both sides are expecting on the list to be discussed?
Well, I think the way I would sum up the sentiment in the business community right now is one of resilience, one of showing and demonstrating strength. I mean, it's been a difficult 10 years, that the business community has gone through under, with the geopolitical, issues and tensions in the relationship. So the business community is here, they're thriving, and we're resilient. Now, what we can expect out of the discussion come April or at other times throughout the year, it's all a work in progress. And so we're hoping for, not so much a great bargain, but we're hoping for greater, clarity, predictability in the relationship, and most importantly, safeguards, to guard against any disruptions that may occur.
Yeah, meanwhile, we have seen the concerns of tariffs not necessarily dying down, but we see tariffs being used as a politicized tool.
Yeah, I characterize tariffs, first of all, it's something that is borne by the consumers ultimately, but when it becomes a political tool, it creates a lot of disruption and lack of predictability that is a concern. In order to encourage a Chinese company to invest in the U.S. and put up the money to manufacture, you need to also give them some assurance that, the supply chains will not be disrupted by, the, tariffs that come at the whim of whoever is in a leadership position at the time. So we need more greater predictability on what the process is going forward. And those protections, those assurances are what business needs, meaning Chinese businesses, before they invest in the U.S.
And this year, of course, is midterm election in the United States. Political winds during this time are blowing in different directions. So once again, the sustainability of whatever is being agreed upon, how sustainable will it be, will be the top concern.
In the U.S. political system, you do have changes in leadership. And in some respects, that's a strength because we have the ability to continue to question government, continue to question the way things are done. Unfortunately, it can also mean that there's a bit of lack of predictability. And so that does raise some concern. So in order to make it more sustainable, is a bilateral investment treaty, something that's similar to that was negotiated back in 2016. You know, we need to take a look at that and see if there are terms and conditions within that agreement that need to be resurrected and put into a bilateral agreement that is going to have some staying power and beyond the midterms, beyond the elections of the future.
We have seen the economic dialogue going on, trade and economic dialogue going on between the two sides. How do you see their performance so far?
There has been some success. There's been some setbacks. There's been some miscalculations on both sides about pressure points. And there has been miscalculations on who has more leverage over the other. But overall, it's a work in progress. There are concerns about supply chain issues, and there's concerns about overreaching on leverage that certain sides may have. I mean, the leverage that the U.S. has is a very solid market, and the leverage that the Chinese side has is, supply chain issues. But if we overplay our hands, with our leverage, it could impact, either side. But overall, as long as we continue to talk, we can move forward to provide greater clarity, greater predictability, the safeguards that we need, which at the end of the day gives us the business community the confidence it needs.
Jim, as you have noticed, there are quite a number of state visits over the past few weeks, coming from what they term themselves as the so-called middle powers. Canadian Prime Minister, British Prime Minister, now to mention Prime Minister from Finland, and also from Ireland, and others as well. So how do you see ever-increasing interactions between these economies, well-developed economies, many of them are G7 members, and the Chinese economy?
I think it's important that those so-called middle economies, that the middle powers, that they have their own paths with China. China's a very large economy, and all of these middle powers have something to offer to China. They shouldn't rely upon the United States to carry the day for them. So I think it's a good thing. Part of it too is keep in mind that a lot of the business is very much integrated. The United States and Canada, business is integrated. The United States and the UK, business is integrated. So if there are things that are accomplished by the UK government or the Canadian government or whoever, that oftentimes benefits the multinational business community. So, if they're here to work things out, to improve the business environment for UK business or Canadian business, overall that will affect, in a positive way, AmCham member companies.
Talking about AmCham, the results of their annual business climate survey, some interesting point I have noticed in the readout. One is less concern about geopolitics, compared at least to the year 2025. Secondly, is more confidence about profit for businesses. Tell me more about that.
The business climate survey shows that there has been a rebound in profitability and specifically to consumer goods, services areas, and so that's a good sign. It's a good sign that we do have, increased profitability. But more than that, what we're seeing through the survey is that China is still in the top 5, top 3 for many companies. So China is still a very strong strategic market. We're also seeing that companies are not decoupling. They're not wholesale leaving China. And that is a very positive reflection that the market is still, important for their companies. Geopolitical tensions are still a concern. It's in the top 3. But also the Chinese economy is one that we are monitoring and taking a look at And there could be improvements, policy improvements that could improve the economy in certain ways, but that's something that is very much on the minds of business.
But in between, we have seen quite a number of twists and turns. For example, Venezuela, Iran, Greenland, and the list might continue. So from the business perspective, of course, it's not directly impacting a China-U.S. trade and economic relations. But as we know, in the globalized world, a lot of things are interacting with one another. So tell me more about your latest feeling about all of this.
These things have happened. They're happening, and could be a distraction, or they could be a disruption with this ongoing truce. But from the business community, we're actually satisfied that both leaders have shown some restraint, not to allow these things that are on the sidelines create issues. Because the bottom line is the first and second largest economy in the world. It's important that we continue our discussions, our dialogues, and not be distracted. It's very important that we continue to try to work through our differences. If we were to get distracted by all of these geopolitical issues, who knows where the relationship would go.
There was a time when media stories, particularly in the U.S., talking about, U.S. businesses are all leaving China. So that is not necessarily what is going on right now, at least according to your climate survey.
I've been here for almost 30 years, and there has always been talk about companies leaving, people leaving. And a lot of that has to do as China's economy matures. And there's changes, in the way things are manufactured here, and there's changes in the way things operate here. There are going to be some companies that make the strategic decision to move elsewhere, and it may be a cost issue, but that has always been a topic of discussion for at least the past 30 years. And those are more strategic decisions on behalf of business. But we don't see the wholesale departures that people have anticipated. We saw some departures, or restructurings during COVID, but that was more of, a strategic decision to better improve the supply chain issues.
Meanwhile, we see many European businesses are actually moving into China due to various reasons. So the Chinese market was going to be even more competitive, not just the Chinese companies vis-a-vis the international company, but also among, as we all know, the international companies themselves. So whoever has a stronger footing will have a better say in the market share, it seems.
In order to be relevant, you need to be here. This is the second largest economy in the world, and potentially will be the first largest in the world at some point. But to be relevant, to be a relevant player in the market, not just a relevant player in China, but in the global market, you need to be here. And that's important.
We have seen in China's 15th five-year plan, the new productive forces being mentioned, new quality growth. How is the U.S. business community looking at these new trends going on in China and taking advantage of it for your businesses, not here, but also all over the world?
From a historical perspective, I think the last 4 or 5-year plans have focused on innovation, have focused on having China move up the value chain on innovation. That is natural, and that is important. It's important for the Chinese people. We're moving away from labor-intensive, industry sectors to being more innovative and driving an innovation-based economy. That's all good. The American business community, the AmCham business community, realizes it needs to tap into that. And it's very important that we be here as China focuses its policies on creating an innovation-focused, environment. Promoting R&D, promoting high-level, growth.
But we still see export controls, for example, policies like that by the United States, particularly in the innovation area related to AI, to chips. Now, American business community have been arguing, if you do that, the Chinese going to develop their own, and eventually we're going to end up with no market. And that has been very strong voice, but whether that business voice has worked so far, your thoughts?
Export controls really need to they must have a rational legal basis. Are the controls truly about national security, or are you overreacting, overreaching? And that's always been an issue. I mean, export controls have been around for hundreds of years, and if you overreact, what happens is you drive the other side that's subject to controls to self-sufficiency, one, or two, your allies, your competitors are going to step in and fill the market as well. So export controls only work if it's truly based upon a legal basis, a national security basis, or controls because of shortages or whatever the reason is. But if you overreact, if you overreach, it doesn't help the U.S. economy, and it basically drives those that are targeted again, into self-sufficiency or looking for other suppliers.
Some American businesses have been telling me over the past few years, they say, it was you, the politicians, that told us 30 years ago to be here in China, to work with Chinese and to build great companies. But now, how can you just turn around and say, you guys should get out? It doesn't make sense. Do you share the same logic?
I mean, 30, 40 years ago, the United States government told us to be citizen ambassadors. To be citizen ambassadors and be here as a way, just like diplomats, in bringing China into the global fold, to bring China out of the Cultural Revolution, away from isolation, away from containment, and bring them into the global community. Business was citizen ambassadors, and so that is part of our mission, so to speak, and we have sent our employees to global schools. We've sent, and they've sent their families and their children to be educated around the world. I mean, that's all part of that integration process, and we need to continue on that path of integration and not go down and return to isolation or containment, because that doesn't work. That was the situation from 1949 until the early 80s. Nobody wants to go down that path again. So there's a lot to be said about continuing on a path in a close way. And again, I'm not saying to keep your enemies closer as a way of saying something negative about China or the Chinese people or the government, but it shows some support to integrating into the global economy. And I think that has been business's mission for 40 years.
I know you are not only a business person. Meanwhile, you are trying to rally the crowd among the American businesses. And at the same time, you're a writer. You wrote a very popular novel recently, and which is likely also to be put into a movie, turned into a movie and directed by Chinese directors and also participated by Chinese actors and actresses. Tell me more about that.
Well, I mean, first it's not a novel. It's
Okay.
actually a true story. It's a
right.
nonfiction narrative about a historical event that happened in China in 1923. And it's China's great train robbery that took place. And it involved, foreigners from multiple countries that became hostages. And it was, in some respects, a troubling time because of the warlord era going on. But yeah, the book has received a lot of very good attention, a lot of fabulous book reviews, and I'm very grateful for that. And it is in the process, it's in development for a film, and I take the view that this film, as a co-production, is a way that both the United States and China can work together, that the talent from around the world can work together, that we can use innovative technologies in developing the film in a way that we work together. And then when it's released, it will proudly be a co-production in something that both the U.S. and China can say, wow, this is a film that, it's a true story, but it also is representative of how we can work together in ways to, that benefit both sides. It's entertainment, but it will be an entertaining film. And so it'll be a fun film to do, but it'll be an example of how we can work together.
Jim, thank you so much and good luck.
Thank you. It's good to see you.